You know that in financial year 2024, gold prices shot up by 33%.
Gold prices have hit a record high.
Gold is having a moment.
Gold prices are trading off its all-time high.
And the only other time when gold prices shot up by more than 34% in the last 30 years, which is the recorded history of gold that I looked at, was in the year 2008. Yes, in the year 2008, gold prices went up by 35%. But that's like the mini financial crisis, as many call it, which is the worst financial crisis we've seen this century. Stock prices fell by about 50%. So there was a genuine reason for people to run towards safety. But what's the reason now? And more importantly, what should you do with your gold holdings right now? Should you sell them? Or should you continue to hold your gold? Or should you buy more, as I'm suggesting? Before I answer any of these questions, let's understand why gold prices are rising the way they are. There are three main reasons for this, all of which are sort of connected with each other. There's continuous buying of gold by central banks. There is economic uncertainty, and then there is immense geopolitical tensions. There's wars going on pretty much everywhere around the world. So let's try to look at this further. All of this is leading to central banks buying huge quantities of gold, and I'll show you the data in a bit. But there is one reason and one reason alone why central banks are buying gold the way they are, and that is the risk of de-dollarization. Meaning thereby that the fear is that countries will start dealing in currencies other than the US dollar. You see, countries around the world are increasingly trading with each other in currencies other than US dollar. Yet no one is quite certain what's the end to this. Will dollar be replaced by some other currency anytime in the near future? First of all, you have to understand, why does the world deal with each other in US dollar? Today when India buys oil from Saudi Arabia, it does not pay Saudi Arabia in Saudi Riyal or Indian rupees. We pay them in US dollar. If China buys something from Australia, or Australia buys something from China, they pay them in US dollar. How did this system come about, and why does the world trade with each other in US dollar? To understand this, we'll have to go some bit in the history of US dollar and how US dollar became the reserve currency of the world. Imagine how the world operated before cash, that is before paper money. How did transactions work? How did people buy books, coffee, air tickets, and food? You see, as mankind evolved, we started exploiting the resources of our planet and produced a variety of things. Some were essential and others were not quite so essential. We then found ways to share these things with each other, of course for a price. For the lack of a developed system, we started bartering. You give me some of what you make and take some of what I make. As the process of our evolution matured, we realized the difficulty with the system. Some things take years to make, while others take very little effort, and all such things are essential. Think of a house. Imagine I make houses and you grow rice. How do you set a value between rice and house? Like, how much rice are you going to give me to buy a house? 20 years supply of rice would be 1-2 BHK house. So there was a genuine problem with barter system. The problem was a standardized value. An even bigger problem with the barter system was, what if I don't accept what you make? Let's say you sell fish and I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat fish, but I make houses. How do we then transact? The other problem was transporting what you make. Imagine carrying tons of rice or livestock to another city just to buy a piece of land. So to deal with this problem, as humanity evolved, we started using coins by giving a certain denomination to each coin in terms of monetary value. First, we started using brass, copper, silver, and gold, but over time, the use of gold coins became the standard means of exchange. Why gold, you may ask? Well, there are many reasons why gold rose above all other assets to become the most popular form of money. Mainly, it was because of its rarity. How easy was it to recognize? That bright yellow metal, it stands out. And here's the amazing part. You can bury gold deep under the earth, leave it there for years and centuries, and when you dig it up, it's still the same. It does not corrode or rust. It is untouched by time, unlike copper or iron, which rust and decay in just a few years. Gold, you see, it lasts. For the longest time in our history, gold was prevalent as the primary form of money. Yes, from about 600 before Christian era until about late 1800s, gold was the main medium of exchange. So why did we move from gold to paper money? Well, it was mainly because carrying around heavy gold coins was not very practical. Government stepped in and introduced paper money. It was lighter, easier, and backed by gold at first. And this is important. Initially, governments could print only as much money as the amount of gold reserves they held. So you deposit your gold with the government, and in return, the government will give you paper or fiat money in fixed denomination. The idea was to denominate gold in paper form. So for example, rupees 1000 note was equal to 1 unit of gold. Rupees 500 note becomes half a unit of gold, and so on. Countries started issuing currency notes of various denominations and started tying the value of these notes in terms of units of gold. The government in turn promised the depositors that the value of the paper they hold at any point would be equal to its proportionate value of gold which they have deposited. This concept, which guaranteed that any amount of paper money could be redeemed for its value of gold, was called the gold standard. As countries around the world embraced the gold standard, each national currency, the dollar, the pound, franc, rupee, yuan, was merely a name for a certain definite weight of gold. So paper money was just gold in the form of paper. And over time, people began to trust the system. People did not trust gold itself or the paper. They trusted the guarantee behind the paper. This became the foundation of money. So what was the problem with the gold standard? You see, as populations grew and economies expanded, as more and more people started exploiting the natural resources of the world, both production and consumption patterns increased rapidly. What's the problem with that? Well, there's not enough gold to support the growth. How do governments increase the money supply to pay off for those new goods and services? More people means a need for more paper in circulation. The only way is to mine for more gold. But that would be a crazy thing to do, right? People and governments going around the world digging for gold. But that's exactly what happened. If you're interested, you can go and search for California gold rush, where, people started digging gold in the hope that they'll find, they'll hit gold and give their gold and take money from the government in return. But an easier solution, think about it, was to revalue gold. So what was done was the government decided that they could make gold more expensive by allowing itself to print more money. So for example, you deposited 10 grams of your gold with the government and the government gave you rupees 100. The government, or the central bank in this case, simply prints out 100 rupees more and tells you, now your 10 grams of gold is worth rupees 200. There you go, more paper in circulation. I know this sounds crazy, but this is exactly what happened in the late 18th and until the early 20th century. Now, what's the problem with this now? Well, think about it. This would mean constant revaluation of gold. As population and effectively production and consumption patterns of the world increased, the governments would have to continuously revalue gold. In fact, there was one more problem with the system of continuously revaluing gold. You see, as the world became more and more globalized, a need was felt to have a uniform system of currency exchanges. Also, after the two world wars, the world was in such a state of rebuilding because they had destroyed each other so much that the fighting nations finally decided to come together at a place called Bretton Woods in the United States, mainly to rebuild everything that they had destroyed themselves. This created the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. I'll try to summarize what happened very quickly. You see, most European nations still needed each other to trade with each other. Someone was good at making cars, someone was good at making ships like Germany and the United Kingdom. Some other countries were good at making infrastructure. While they relied on each other, but these European nations had such a hostility towards each other that they did not want to directly trade with each other. And hence, they started trading with the United States. So think of United States as a broker. Unlike Europe and Asia, which was devastated by the war, the US mainland was untouched. Its infrastructure, factories, cities remained intact and fully operational, and they kept manufacturing and supplying to the world. For stats, after World War II, the US held more than half of the world's manufacturing capacity and produced nearly half of the world's global GDP. after two devastating wars and excessive protectionism, the 44 nations that met at Bretton Woods in 1944 wanted to create a stable economic order. So it was like this. The world started putting its gold reserves with the US, and in exchange it started getting US dollars. Remember, at all times there was a promise by the US government that whenever the world wanted or any country wanted, they could bring back the US dollar and take the gold reserves back from the US. Initially, the price of gold against US dollar was set at $35 per ounce of gold. But in 1971, the world started doubting the ability of US to redeem all the US dollars and give back its gold, exactly how it is doubting US today, which is the whole talk of de-dollarization. So believe it or not, in 1971, the then President of the United States, Richard Nixon, decided to close the gold window. It was called the Nixon shock. And he said, from today, no more conversion of US dollar into gold. US dollar is the free float reserve currency in the world. And I know it sounds unbelievable, but if you go on YouTube, if you search on Google, you'll find all of this. There's actual video of him announcing that.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
So basically, the world had put their gold with the US and started trading in dollar. But by the time the gold window was closed, the world was so reliant and heavily dependent on the US dollar. Basically, no one knew what they could do if US stopped allowing converting dollar. This basically marked the end of gold, and it started the birth of dollar-based global economy. So yes, most countries put their gold with the United States and started taking US dollar against it. Countries like the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Japan, they all put their gold with the US on the guarantee that they could get it back. And till date, a lot of that gold is lying with the United States. Basically, as I said, nobody was quite sure what to do then once they started trading with US dollar, and that became the main medium of trade across the world. Today we have a situation where nobody really has a solution to this, what to do in terms of going back in time and, using any other currency other than US dollar to trade with each other, because everything could suddenly come to a halt if you try to experiment with any other currency. In short, the situation today is if US has a problem, they can export that problem to the rest of the world. We saw what they did during the COVID-19 crisis, in the 2008 financial crisis, when they did monetary easing and started printing a lot of currency. So if today US has a lot of debt which it owes to China, all it has to do is print the US dollar. The printing press could be on right now, print it and give it to China. They can actually export inflation to pretty much around the world. And this is a problem which really nobody has found a solution to. Is there a solution to this? If you ask me, I think there is none. At least right now in our lifetimes, I expect US dollar to remain the base currency. A lot of countries are trying to move away from the US dollar and trying to settle payments with each other in currencies other than the US dollar. India today buys a lot of its oil from Russia, and we pay Russia in a mix of Russian ruble, Indian rupee, in gold, in Saudi riyal. We're trying to settle it in currencies other than US dollar because US has put sanctions on Russia. So, and that's actually what got a lot of countries worried, countries like India, China, Poland, Russia, Indonesia, because any country would be like, could we be next? Could US put sanctions on us and we would have problems dealing with the rest of the world? So if you look at this chart right now, you see how much gold has been purchased by central bankers in the last 3 years, and compare it with the net purchases of gold over the last many years. In the last 3 years put together, more than 1,000 tons each year is being purchased, mainly by India, China, Poland, Indonesia. So a lot of countries have been buying gold, and the reason is that they're trying to diversify their foreign exchange basket. Because if US were to default, or if the problem was to escalate to a point where countries like China and a lot of other countries which US owe their owe debt to were to start saying that we don't want to receive US dollar for payment of our money, what will then happen? Tricky question, no clear answers to that. By the way, I also keep hearing that US owes a lot of debt to China. Actually, that's not true. US total public debt is about $36 trillion. I have no idea how many zeros go into that. It's just a figure that, 36 trillion US dollar, 9 trillion of which is owed to, it's foreign holdings. So that's how much they owe to countries outside of the United States. And, China has only about 2 to 3% share in that. The maximum is actually Japan. About 10% share of that is Japan. So, you can imagine if US was to default, it's not going to happen. I hope not. Then the ripple effects that it will cause to economies across the world. Be that as it may, my sense is, and my view on gold is, you should definitely hold your gold. If you don't have gold, buy gold, hold on to gold, hold it in your portfolio. If you ask me, the way the world is shaping up, the way geopolitical tensions are rising, and the way, economic uncertainties are coming about by the day, next 2-3 years, you could actually see a parabolic move in gold. As I said, 2008 was the year when gold delivered 35% return in a single year. This year, financial year 2025, it delivered about 33%. Keep in mind, after 2008, that insane return, the year after that, 2009, gold delivered another 21% return. This time, I'm hoping it would be different in that it would actually deliver returns better than it has in the past 1 year. So gold is one of those asset classes which, until people keep thinking it's going to fall, it keeps rising. And whenever there is heightened geopolitical tension and wars, it would keep rising. And, gold is money as we know it for 2,800 years. As I said, since, 800 BC till now. And people somehow compare it with fiat currency, which is not even 200 years old, or let alone the Bitcoin, which does not even have a history of 28 years. The idea and the reason why people hold gold is, if everything fails, we'll go back to where we started. And, Bitcoin and these kind of asset classes, they depend on, first of all, computers. Your computers have to work. I don't understand blockchain, but I do understand if there are no computers tomorrow, a lot of things will not work, and Bitcoin will be one of them. So first of all, I don't want to digress, but don't compare gold to Bitcoin. If you want to diversify, gold is enough other than stocks and fixed income. So definitely hold on to gold. If you ask me, at some point, a lot more countries will start dealing with each other in currencies other than US dollar. And at some point is not very far. I would say it's probably the next 2 to 3 years, 4 years, you'll see increasing amount of global trade being settled in currencies other than the dollar. And central bankers will continue to buy gold, and gold reserves will keep rising for most of these countries. So gold is definitely something you should hold on. In fact, buy more at this point.